Hi, this is Larry. Today what I'm talking about is an introduction to entity relationship diagrams, also known as ERDs. An entity relationship diagram is a basic tool, and actually the primary tool you need to be utilizing for developing and designing databases. The reason why is because the ERD conveys the business rules in a graphical form. When you have to go back and talk to the users or your clients about the database, you're going to have to talk about it through the design process. Don't build it. Talk about it during the design process before you actually build it. In that case, is if you have a graphical format of how you think the database is going to be aligned and illustrate it to them, you can help to get buy-in and understand that they accept it. So it's also commonly referred to as a data model. The ERD is referred as a data model, the logical data model, and it uses symbols to represent real-world objects. So what are the components of an ERD? Well, basically, the major component of entity relationship diagram is the entity itself. The next is going to be considered the association, the reason why and how they're connected, the entities are connected. And lastly are cardinalities. Cardinalities are going to be more about the basically looking at the times and the number of times the occurrences of the association happening. Okay, both association and the cardinalities help to focus and provide an illustration of what the business rules are. Let's look at some of the modeling tools that we're going to be symbols we're going to be utilizing here. It's very simple. What I'm going to be doing for the class and what I'd like to see students do is basically provide a simplified ER model utilizing these symbols. An entity in itself is just basically a square rectangle with the entity name in it. Association will be simply a line with a line on it talking about it and indicated above and below the line the types of the reasons why the association is happening or how it's happening. And then also cardinality, a number or the symbol M located next to the entity where the association connects. We're going to be talking more about association and cardinality later, but let's just look at this example down here and illustrate how it works. You can see we have two entities. We have a vendor entity and we have a product entity. And there's a line going between the two of them that shows that they're associated. And above the line it says supplies, and below the line says supplied. Basically, we're saying the vendor supplies many products, and that's where we have many on this side over here next to the product in the association. And then we go, and the product is supplied by one vendor. So you can see how that works. The vendor supplies many products. The product is supplied by one vendor. Those would be business rules. Let's take a look at a sample ERD. This doesn't show the associations other than a line. It doesn't indicate the reasons why. But let's just walk through this a little bit. What you're seeing here is an illustration of a typical data design, based design for a product and ordering products like in a company. This is not unusual to see this. You may be working with this type of instance many different times. For example, here we see already we have at the top here sales rep as an entity and customer. And the sales rep can have many customers, but the customer can have only one sales rep. Next, we're going to see customer and order. A customer can place many orders, but the order can only have one customer. Business rules. Now next you're going to see here something called order has an order line and a product. Most people would think that the order would be connected directly to the product, but the problem is that an order, in most cases, can have many products. Therefore, you have a many-to-many. And a many-to-many can cause a lot of repeating groups, which are a problem. And so therefore, when you see, anytime you see a many-to-many, you want to make sure you can try to break it down into a one-to-many. In that case, you usually have a composite entity that's between the two. And this one is called ORD line. So between order and product, we have an ORD line. And the ORD line means the different order lines, every line. So all the different products that a person can order with their quantities and prices, etc. Imagine that in an order. So we have an order can have many ORD lines, but an ORD line is only related to one order. And also we can have an ORD line is related to one product, but the product can have many ORD lines. And understand the product's going to have many ORD lines because there's going to be a lot of different types of orders. So there's actually an entity that will hold all this information, but it'll be associated with different products and different orders. Let's talk a little bit more about associations here. Associations are reasons for associating entities that are relevant to the business, basically. They specify the interactions and the dependencies between the entities, meaning that they're basically shown that the two entities are connected, and the reasons why and how they work. And usually association is a combination of the line and the word phrase description. I always like to see that when I see the different ER diagrams. For example, here we have a department and an employee. If you start from left to right, the department directs employees, and the employee is directed by the department. See that? The department directs employee, and the employee is directed by the department. So they're going to be associated with each other. Okay? Let's talk about cardinalities related to this. A cardinality is expressed as the expected number of related occurrences between the two entity types in a given relationship, meaning that we know that an employee can have a department, but how many occurrences can they have? Now, the reason why occurrences are important is because we have to be able to look at worrying about repeating groups within the database itself. In the business rules, well, actually in the business itself, they'll help you identify that by asking about, well, if you have a department, if you have an employee, how many can you have between the two? Can you have one to many? Is it just limited? Is there only one to this, etc.? In this case, it shows here that a department can have many employees, but the employee will only have one department, like one boss. Okay? This is making sense. A department will have many employees, and the employee will only have one department that it reports to and is directed by. Let's look at one-to-many relationships. Okay, as we look at this, putting the cardinalities and association together, the thing that you're going to try to achieve all the time is making sure that you have a one-to-many relationship between all your entities. A single occurrence of the parent entity type potentially refers to more than one occurrence of the child entity type is what a one-to-many is. So you have a parent-to-child relationship. This is the basic common way that all the relational databases work most efficiently. Once you're getting into try to get into other things, it gets a little more difficult. So it can be more specific if you go one-on-one, but you can have a one-on-one relationship, you can have different types of relationship, but one-to-many is what you really try to look for. So a case here is that we'd have a department again with many employees. Now, you can have many relationships. Okay, basically an example here shows is that the store and the product can have many orders between each other. Okay, is it possible the store can have many different products? Yes, it is. And it could probably be okay to have this. However, many relationships need to be checked via normalization. Very large red warning here. Anytime you're designing and putting together an ERD and you come up with a many-to-many relationship, you're going to need to normalize to make sure that it's really not the case. But in this case, if you're looking at it, just simply doing the ENR diagram, you may know that you have to just automatically put something in there. So a store orders many products, and the product is ordered by many stores. Okay, so those are things you have to look at. How could you break this up? Could you have like an order line, a composite entity inside of here? You have to look at all that. So just a warning: anytime you come up with a many-to-many relationship, warning, warning, warning. Think about it. Look at the business rules. Is it really a many-to-many? If it is, you're going to have repeating groups. How can I break that up? Look at it. Now, you're probably asking yourself, how do you discover the association and cardinalities? Well, this is where it gets into look at the relationships between entities by examining the business rules and requirements. That's simple. Business rules and requirements. Business rules and requirements. I mentioned before in another video about attributes that the customers only talk about things and is looking at attributes, the data they actually want. And as a programmer or a developer, you're going to need to be able to identify and put all those attributes together as entities. You're also going to have to be listening for how those entities are associated with each other. And that's what you have to put together. The customers will never really just tell you take this entity and associate it with this entity and this and one-to-many. No, no, no. They're going to talk all over the board. But they're also going to start to talk about things like business rules. They'll mention, well, customer has many over here. You hear those words. You have one of this or that. You need to start listening to that, and those become the association and cardinalities. Look for and define the business rules and requirements. And that's why an ERD does a good job with sitting down with the customer to help review the business rules and requirements very easily. Without looking at all the attributes or anything else, the customer should be able to understand that if I have a product and I have an order, then I'm going to have multiple lines on that product. So therefore, I need to have this in between. Okay? Let's take a little second here to look at and discovering association cardinalities by looking at this simple little employee database. If you read the first line, you can probably see already that you're going to have an employee entity. The next line indicates you're probably going to have a dependent entity. Now, when you look at those, do you think that they're going to be associated? Okay, so it must be the employee's children must be kept. So there must be dependents. So dependents must be an entity associated with employee. Now let's look at the third line. Employee must be assigned an employee type. Well, and it can be applied to more than one employee. So employee type must be another entity. And it can apply to more than one employee. So you have a one-to-many relationship. Looking at department, we talked about department before, so you can have one-to-many. And the same thing with job skills. We can have one-to-many. This is pretty straightforward. Understanding, too, is that I put together this, and I'm giving this as an example. You're going to have to, as a developer, be able to sit there and sit down with people and kind of put these things together, because people are not going to tell you as clear as possible as this. Okay? So always go out there, look at the business rules, ask a lot of questions, and try to put together an ERD. What you're going to find is that ERDs are going to be very important for you. I remember one time putting together a database with some guys sitting around a bar. Literally after work one day, we were talking about something. We had these different napkins and different things laying around. So what we ended up doing with little pieces of napkins and papers, and I've done this many different times, whether it's simple ERD or putting something together for object-oriented programming. You know, if you got something around, put it together. But it's not unusual. We'll sit there and just kind of move the objects around on the table. Okay, what is this? What is that? And then finally, we'll take them all back, and we'll make it all work. Understand that you're going to have to think logically about this, and an ERD provides the biggest and best model for you to do, to not only for you see it for yourself graphically, but also to show your customers and work through with your customers.